Step on up, sit down, twist off that bottle top or crack open that can, and welcome to Porch Matters. This is Terry Cagle coming to you from my back porch. Yes sir, yes ma'am, the name of this show is authentic. On Porch Matters, our saying is this: big issues or just a friendly conversation, no topic is off limits. We take pride in being able to talk about anything with each other in an open discussion. Open discussion is one of the only ways to learn. Your perspective could be changed. You could change the perspective of others. Friends and family, welcome back to another episode of Porch Matters. I'm glad you're here. Glad to be here with you tonight. I'm very glad to be back out on the porch. Last episode I came to you with, I sounded a little under the weather. I ended up going to the doctor last week. They possibly found a touch of pneumonia. Been getting over that. I ended up having to sweep the porch off, get all the pollen out of here, also off of the desk that I'm sitting on too. So really hoping I hadn't done anything crazy to, what's the word I'm looking for? Catch all of this crap again. That's what I'm looking to say. But got a good show coming to you today. But before we get there, if this is your first time listening to this show, I just want to say thank you for hitting that play button on whatever platform it is that you're listening to us on and taking a chance. You know, as I've said before, the most important thing and the most priceless thing that you can give somebody is your time. So thank you very much for giving me your time today, and I hope that you enjoy what you hear. If you do like what you hear, make sure you hit your like, subscribe, or follow button on whatever platform it is that you're listening to us on, and download the rest of the episodes in our archives, and maybe share it with a friend of yours. Sure would appreciate it. First and foremost, before we go any further, I would really appreciate all the people that are listening to this that considers themselves Christians to please keep my uncle in your prayers. My uncle, I'm not going to give any details as to what's going on. The Lord knows. That's not for me to give out, but I would really appreciate it if you would put my uncle on your local church's prayer list. If you know anybody that goes to church, if you would, get them to put his name on their prayer list as well. His name is Eddie Williams, and I really would appreciate it. I'm not just saying this because he's my uncle either. He's got a heart of gold. He's got that servant's heart. He loves to help people, never asks for anything in return. And to be quite honest with you, he'd probably be really mad at me right now for even saying anything about him. That's just how he is. But hey, this is one of those things where he can be mad at me all he wants to. But, Unc, if you happen to be listening to this, I love you, sir. Moving right along. Porch Matters food review this episode. Two of my cousins, Madison and Riley, ended up having their senior prom, and last Friday I was honored and privileged to be able to go and watch them get their prom pictures took. They really made me feel old. After they had their pictures and everything took, we were talking about where to go eat, and we ended up going to Good Hope, Alabama, and we went to the Stash House. Now, that building has been the home of 2 or 3 different restaurants that I can remember. However, I've been wanting to give the Stash House a try. just to do a good review for you, and I was not disappointed. We ended up sitting down, and I ordered the barbecue fries. They were really good. We also had a little bit of a sampler going on. So if you're looking for good food, really enjoyed the atmosphere. It being on Friday night, it was pretty vibrant. The longer we sat there, the busier the place got. Swing by and check out the Stash House. I think you'll enjoy it, and it's definitely hashtag Fatboy approved, and I'll be going back. I've absolutely got to go back because Stacy was not along with me on this trip, and she kind of got a little bit perturbed at me because I ended up eating there without her. I'm sorry, hon. But yeah, if you're in the Good Hope area, Coleman, or just in driving distance, give Stash House a shot. Tell them you heard about them on Porch Matters. I'd really appreciate it. This episode's question from the porch, we're going back to the would you rather well, folks. Would you rather be allergic to peanut butter or be allergic to chocolate? Now, me personally, this one's tough. Why? Because my favorite candy in the world is Reese's Cups. Yeah, this one's tough. However, if I have to pick one, I would rather be allergic to peanut butter. Why? Because I love chocolate. My name is Terry Cagle, and I am a chocoholic. What say you? Leave your comments down below in social media. I do promise to post it. I can't wait to read your answers and share them on the next episode of Porch Matters. On this episode, John Benjamin Jones joins me on the porch. John Jones is a retired law enforcement officer. He's also a former federal law enforcement officer. He's also a U.S. Navy hospital corpsman. Mr. Jones wrote a book called A Higher Calling, a biblical guide for first responders, military, and veterans. He was nice enough to send me a copy of the book, and I was able to read some of it ahead of time. And I'm very, very thankful for him, his book, and the conversation that you're about to hear. I really think you'll enjoy it. And without further ado, let's get started. John Jones, welcome to the porch, my friend. How are you?
I'm good. How you doing?
It's
Thanks
another day in paradise.
Always.
So,
yeah.
How's the weather where you're at?
It's been thunderstorming. I'm down on the South Coast, the Gulf Coast, South Mississippi, and it's been raining pretty good the last day. But, I lived in California. I grew up in Southern California and lived there for the last 13 years before moving here. So I think we've got more rain in 1 month than we did in 13 years living in Southern California. So it's nice.
Yeah, the winter months around here are really wet. Anytime the temperature's nice, expect a monsoon.
Yeah.
So if you want dry weather, it's going to be cold. That's just the way it is. Now, granted, around April, you'll see a big difference. You'll be praying that it rains because you'll be choking to death on pollen.
Yeah.
And then when the summer hits, you'll have to sit for 5 minutes and let the dust settle before you get out of your car.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's all is what it is. That's basically what I say all the time.
Yeah, it is.
Do you like living in the Gulf Coast more than what you did in California?
Well, like I said, I grew up in Southern California, and when I went in the military, I was stationed in Southern California for quite a bit, but I was everywhere. So I was in Florida, I was in Virginia for a while, I was in Texas. My wife's father retired from the Navy, so she lived a significant part of her, you know, childhood living in North Carolina and stuff like that. So we had talked about it for a long time. We lived in Nebraska for a long time, and it's just too cold there, uh, during the winters. But um, we talked about it, so we always kind of wanted to go somewhere to the southeast, and this is kind of where we actually found a house online, put a bid in online, sight unseen, bought it, moved out here, and got lucky. We got really lucky in where we ended up.
Out of all the places that you lived, which one would you say was your favorite?
Uh, gosh, that's I've liked most of the places I lived for different aspects. Like California, we lived outside of LA, but that's where I grew up. My parents are still there. I come from a really large family, so we had a lot of support for my job when that moved us back there. I was a federal air marshal, so I was gone a lot. So I had a lot of support for when I was gone, knowing that solid people would be there for my wife and kids, and so that was good. I like Pensacola. I really like Pensacola, but I was in the Navy then, so it was things are a lot different when you're in the military than when you're providing everything for yourself.
I understand.
So
Well, you spoke about being an air marshal. Let's just jump right in.
okay.
What branch were you in the military?
So I was in the Navy. I was a Navy corpsman. So I was in for 6.5 years total, split service, but 6.5 years total. Most of that time was with the Marines. So I was a FMF corpsman. Did deployment to Somalia with them. So I'm a bit older than some of the, but did that for 6.5 years, got med boarded, got out, ended up getting, from there, went into local law enforcement. Did local law enforcement for about 5.5 years. Was raising 6 kids, all under 10.
Mm.
Law enforcement's kind of a rough, law enforcement's rough anyway. That's kind of one of the reasons I wrote the book. But thought medical was where I was supposed to be. So I left law enforcement, enrolled in civilian nursing school. It's not, civilian medical is great. I mean, they are really good people and do a really hard job,
Yes.
but it's completely different than the military medicine. And ended up, since I wasn't back on the sheriff's department, I ended up utilizing that time to get my master's degree, and then went federal from there. So I started off with the VA, and then got hired in with the Federal Air Marshal Service, and then I just retired from them in January. So,
did you have any kind of a gap between your military career versus your career with the sheriff's department?
Not a whole lot, just mainly the hiring process. So, I got med boarded in May, and I initially got in as a civilian jailer, corrections officer, in October. So May to October, just a little bit, and then got hired in with the sworn deputy position in December. So
I knew I liked you for a reason. We're brothers, and we didn't even know it.
Yeah.
So, whenever you got your master's and everything and went federal, what was the process on that? And I always thought about doing it, but by the time I got around to deciding to do it, I had already crossed that age threshold that they put in the fine
Right.
print.
They do, and I almost missed it as well. Um, so if anybody's listening and is thinking about going federal, if you spend any kind of time in the military, federal is a really good way to go because your military time, you can buy it back. It's ridiculous. Like I said, I had like 6.5 years, and my buyback for that time was like $2,500 or something like that. But what that does is it converts your military time towards time in the federal service, so it goes towards your retirement. So, but the process itself was insane. I had a bachelor's degree, master's degree, civilian law enforcement experience, military experience with a combat deployment. And I was not hearing things back. I was putting in dozens of applications a week. It's really the process itself is more how you do your resume. Your resume has to be specific to that job. You can't do
You
the
can't do a
same
general
resume,
resume
a
and put it in
general.
everywhere else.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Right. So it's
I
time
actually,
consuming.
the reason why I was asking for you was I actually attempted to go into the TSA,
Okay.
and Lord have mercy, the process was ridiculous. And
Yeah, it is.
there were about three of us at the time that decided we was going to try and do it. It just seemed rather funny that all of their applications just kept just moving right along step for
Yeah.
step. And if you've never done it, folks, there's about a 20-step process to go through just to even get considered for the TSA. I can't speak for the air marshals by any means, but I think I had to do two written tests. I had to go to a certain place and do it, blah blah
Yeah, the
blah.
computer-based test.
Yes. Yeah, it was a very strenuous process, that's for sure.
Right. Yep.
Did you enjoy your time as a federal air marshal?
I really enjoyed my time. The Federal Air Marshal Service is a very small um, law enforcement entity within the federal government compared to FBI, Secret Service, DEA, those kinds of things. Um, but even though it's a much smaller agency, the percentage of veterans within the Air Marshal Service is the highest compared to any of the other law enforcement branches in the federal government. So it was great. It was like being back in the military, but I could, grow a beard and stuff like that. So it was really great. The camaraderie, the um, just the giving each other grief all the time, that constant back and forth. It was almost, and ironically, even though I didn't utilize them to as references or anything to get into the Air Marshal Service, two of my Marines that I was in Somalia with ended up in the same office I was in, and because I was randomly sent to Los Angeles. Because you can apply for a specific office, but they make you sign a waiver saying that you will move wherever they tell you. So like a relocation kind of thing. And
How many different offices are there?
um, they have closings and stuff like that. So not as many as the FBI, but 20 something. So they're located strategically throughout the United States for not just domestic um, flight coverage, but international flight coverage as well, and based off threat and stuff like that.
It's understandable.
Yeah.
So
Now, one thing we do have is a couple of buddies of mine, because of the nature of the job, you travel. So it's not like, again, like the FBI, where if you're assigned to the Los Angeles field office, you have to live in Los Angeles, because you're even though it's your primary duty station, you're away from your duty station as your job. We have guys that were, from Texas, from, Nevada, so they can keep their houses where they're from, and just as long as they don't miss their flights, as long as they don't miss their training and their assigned things, you can kind of live all over. So if that's something like or you can live within a commuting distance. So I knew some people who on the East Coast, assigned to some of on the East Coast, they might have been stationed in, Georgia or North Carolina, but they lived in northern Alabama. Or I knew another buddy that was stationed out of Dallas, and he lived in Arkansas because he had a big 400-acre horse ranch that he was, running as well.
That must be nice.
Oh yeah, I mean, but that's not typical with the federal law enforcement specifically. And the only reason that's allowed is because you leave your home duty station regularly. But that's another thing. It's not like military deployment where you're gone for months at a time, a year at a time. But there were many times where I slept in my own bed next to my wife 9 nights out of the month.
Wow.
So you're gone. That's the thing. You're gone all the time. And
that's rough on the family.
It can be. And I'm really lucky that my wife is how my wife is very supportive, very understanding. So, but to go back to what you were saying, I almost missed that age requirement as well. So through all the different things that I did, I turned 36 the month after I graduated the academy. So, and you have to be hired before you're 37. So if anybody didn't know that, that's the age requirement.
When you're still currently a marshal, correct?
I just retired in January.
For all of your service, not just with the military, but whenever you put that badge on for the county and whenever you put that badge on for your federal marshal position, I thank you for your service, sir.
I appreciate it.
A lot.
It has truly been my honor.
A lot of people have asked me about mine, and the only thing that I can tell them, wearing a badge is kind of like being in the military. I can tell you all day what it's about, but you're never going to grasp it until you walk a mile in my shoes.
Right.
You're never going to feel the same things that I felt until you hear that door slam behind you and realize that you might be wearing a badge, but you're locked up just like they are.
Yep.
People don't understand that. So
they don't. And corrections, man, I did corrections long enough to know that you guys that do it long term, God bless you. That is so hard, so difficult getting in that. And several of the guys that I got hired with knew in the Air Marshal Service, because that's another benefit of getting into the federal law enforcement system, is you can move around much easier.
right.
It's not a guarantee, but it's much easier once you get in the system. But I worked with several people who came from the Bureau of Prisons, the federal corrections and prisons, and a lot of those guys were institutionalized themselves, even though they were, and one of my buddies in particular, he even came back to me several years later when I had moved into an instructor position in the field office, and he came back and he was like, bro, I know when we first met, we were kind of had a little beef going on, but he's like, that was because I was still in that mindset. So you guys that do that,
much like with yourself, I know my defense mechanism a lot of the time was almost like almost like a wrestling or like a wrestler. You might be this way, but you play a character over here almost. It was almost like, you know, and I've said this on my show a few times, so my people are probably like, why are you saying this again? Well, you might have heard it before, but this is the first time he's heard it. Um, Terry is a pretty nice fella. Big heart, do anything for you. Officer Cagle, on the other hand, was straight laced. If it was the rule, that was the rule. That was the way he went. And if he said he was going to do something, didn't matter if it was give you a request form or whatever, he's going to do it. And, excuse my language, folks, but, there was a time whenever I walked those halls that I actually answered the asshole.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the way it was. And I had a little ritual that I used to do and at the jail that I worked at, there was two main doors going from the inside to the parking lot. I would call those doors on my radio, and before I walked through the outside one, the uniform shirt came off. It was just my ritual of trying to leave everything at the job.
Yep.
And I only lived 30 minutes from my house. Sometimes it'd take me an hour and a half to get home.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking
absolutely.
about. You know what I'm talking about. I didn't want to bring that day, that night. I didn't want to bring it home with me. And a lot of people, again, don't understand that. It's like your regular, it's like and I'm not knocking anybody's profession. If you're working and you're doing a service, God bless you. But it's not like all the other typical jobs around. It's just as stressful times 10. If you look at statistics, law enforcement is one of the very top on hazardous conditions and also suicide. There's a reason for that.
Yes, there is. And
you see so much stuff. You put up with so much stuff. You get to the point where you feel like you can't trust anybody. And you get to a point where if you trust somebody, most of the time it means more coming from you than I love you.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And one of the other things that people don't realize about law enforcement specifically, but any of the first responder fields. So you talk about that stress and that decompression and people not really understanding what it is that you go through, what you see, what you experience, what you have to do. But the average length of a law enforcement officer's retirement is 7 years.
That's right.
And there's a reason for that. And a lot of the shortness for that is heart attacks.
Yes.
Guys, I mean, I can't tell you how many guys I know who I had a really good buddy that retired in July, had a massive heart attack running. He was running with his youngest son on New Year's Day and passed away.
Yeah.
I mean, 5 months.
I was speaking to another retired officer once before, and not for the show, just me and him had known one another for a while. He had recently retired after 20 plus years of service, and we was talking, and I came to a revelation, and I told him, I'm just going to tell you too, there's no telling how many years that place took off my life. My blood pressure used to average 160 over 110. Um,
And that was resting. That was your
yes,
resting blood pressure. Yeah, because
yes. Uh, I I knew I had to do something different whenever I had to have my appendix removed. And I had a pain. I don't know if it's because I just got a high pain tolerance or what, but it just kind of felt like I had been doing sit-ups for the first time in 5 years. Whenever you go to
right.
move, you feel a
Yeah.
little muscle soreness,
Yeah.
no big deal. And the sheriff at the time sent out a letter, and you know this, in bad weather conditions, deputies will usually go out and pick jailers up, carry them home, everything like that. This particular sheriff sent out a memo saying that he wasn't going to do that anymore. And I had enough time built up that I saw that, read between the lines, and
Mhm.
decided I was going to use that pain in my belly as an excuse because I was going to go to the doctor and finally get it checked out after everybody told me I needed to. And turned out I ended up having to I had acute appendicitis and had to have surgery. I was watching that blood pressure cuff on my arm, and if you've been in the emergency room, you know it goes off about every 5 minutes. Sure enough, it was reading 160 and 165 over 110, 115. As soon as that doctor told me that I was going to have appendix surgery, the very next time, if I'm lying, I'm dying. As soon as he told me that, the very next time that blood pressure cuff went off, 130 over 70. That's
Yeah.
how much that's how much stress can be put on you by wearing that badge.
Yep.
And a lot of
Yeah.
people don't understand that.
They don't. They don't. And a lot of people don't want to understand that. I mean, look at the military. I mean, people who have been in the military tend to look and find other veterans to be friends with. So you think that there's this massive portion of the population who has been in the military when the reality of it is, what is it, about a little over 1% of the population of the United States has been in the military or in the military right now. I mean, so people, a lot of people don't want to know, and that's fine. It's it's absolutely fine. I don't necessarily see anything wrong with that. But for the people who voluntarily say, you know, I will go and I will face this and I will do the things that you don't want to do, God bless those guys and girls and
One
women. Yeah,
100%.
absolutely. Yeah,
100%.
and yeah. So
How has your transition been? And you know what? You know exactly what I'm talking about.
I do.
For
I do.
those of you that don't understand the question, there is a huge transition from being in service like that to just becoming a civilian. There is a huge change. So I'm going to let you answer that since I
It
said that.
it is huge. It's so my transition was kind of rough. My wife and I had to revisit some things, but um, so for what you were kind of alluding to is a lot of first responders, military, a lot of people in these professions, the profession becomes who they are. That it is their self-worth, it's their identity, it's their value, it's and not just value in with like their self value, but their value within their family, their value within their friend circle, their value within their community. Um, so it's it's a very hard transition, and the longer you're in it, I think the harder it actually is. Um, but like I was saying earlier, my wife is extremely supportive. Um, so we did have to revisit some things, but I mean, I did get kind of a timing wise, I kind of got a little bit lucky in the fact that the pandemic had hit in 2020, because if you remember, flights basically stopped. So we didn't have a whole lot of those kind of, operations. So I did get a little bit of time where I was able to do a mini transition back in 2020. So that helped a lot. But as far as the identity, the self-worth, it's been hard. I mean, but at the same time, I know it's necessary. I've been doing this since '92. This type of stuff, and like I had mentioned, all the different kind of capacities. So
it's what you know. It's all
it is,
you know.
and it's all I know. And I've actually been kind of floundering a little bit, trying to land on what it is. Because what am I going to do next? I'm still capable somewhat. I mean, I have some really significant health issues now because of the physiology and stuff like that. But physiological effects of flying, and then the physiological effects of being a 140-pound corpsman carrying 100 pounds of medical gear. So stuff like that. But what am I going to do? But I also, my wife is like, you don't have to do anything. Now it's time to get in and do what you want to do. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, a gun carrier. I don't have to be even though I am a firearms instructor, I don't have to go and do that. I don't have to be, a defense, fighting instructor, or, I was because of my corpsman background, I was the medical instructor, so but I don't have to do that. But that is all I know. Right. So that's one of the reasons. It was actually during the COVID, that mini break during COVID, that my wife, she had been talking to me for years about writing a book, because I had spent, I mean, pretty much since I got out of the military, mentoring younger guys. And then when 9/11 happened, and then the global war on terror, and all of the people that are personally related to me. I have a ton of nieces and nephews. My son just got back from Iraq a couple of months ago. I have 6 kids. I only have one son, but one of my other daughters was a corpsman in the Navy as well. Just a ton of people at work, just kind of mentoring them through some of the hardships that you deal with. She's like, you got to write a book. You got to write a book, and just, even if it doesn't get published, publish yourself and just give it to people, kind of thing. So that's where the book kind of came from.
I know with me, I had an escape plan, as I call it.
Yeah.
I had already had my Class B CDLs, but I let my dad talk me out of it as far as getting my A's. I already had my B's, but I had to go ahead and go back to school and everything to get my Class A's. So I went and got a loan, because I'll just say it, I was living off of $650 every 2 weeks, barely scraping by, having to live off of some credit cards, part of which just because I'm terrible with my own money. But that's another story for another time. I could manage your money and have it figured down to the last penny. Mine, I'm terrible with. But after I got my CDLs, I left the jail for the last time, because I had left previously and just tried to stay within the county to keep my time.
Right.
I was miserable, so I went back.
Yeah.
And that place is, if I was ever going to understand a crack addict, that jail would be my crack.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I loved the job because I felt like I was doing something that mattered.
Yep.
And that's what gets everybody.
Yep.
You know,
Yeah.
there's some people in this world that strictly get that badge, and because they got bullied as a kid or whatever, they put that badge on and automatically think they're 10 feet tall and bulletproof. And I used to tell people all the time, you make the badge. The badge doesn't make you. You don't come into this place looking for trouble.
You'll find it.
Yeah, you will. You go into that place hoping for the most boring day or boring night that you've ever had. But
Yep.
if trouble presents itself, you handle it the best way that you can.
Yep.
But yeah, I missed feeling like I mattered.
Right.
My transition once I got into a truck, I think I talked to maybe 5 people for about 6 months. I didn't talk to anybody unless I had to or I chose to. I stayed by myself and I made some friends, and then I would, in a truck, the CB is almost an extinct thing now. Everybody's got headsets.
Right.
So I would be driving at night and I would call a couple of friends and we'd have just big conference calls basically. But a lot of times I'd just sit back and be quiet unless I was real comfortable in the situation, because it was just me. I wanted to be quiet. I just wanted to do my job, go home. And then 6 months later, I was put into the position that I am now, and I actually had to socialize. And I was a nervous wreck.
Yeah.
I really, for 2 weeks, I was literally walking around something like Michael J. Fox. I was rattled because it had been so. It had. I'm not picking on Michael J. Fox by any means.
No,
but,
but that's the kind of humor though. That's that humor that, and I know you're not picking on him, and right. I'm not laughing at him, but yeah.
I knew my sense of humor to this day. Already know. Dark, morbid, whatever. I laugh. Horror movies are comedy for me, and I usually cheer the bad guy until the good guy starts to win. Then it makes me upset.
Yeah, but I mean if anybody spends any significant time in the military, first responder field, anywhere where they're around trauma, grief, death, violence, and then have to go home, whether it's that night or 6 months later from a deployment or whatever, and you have to develop those dark coping mechanisms or you won't survive.
Nope.
You won't survive it.
You won't.
And once you spend any kind of significant time doing that, it will not go away. No matter how much you want it to, or how much you're, like you were saying, you went from the jail to the, trucking industry and then back into having to deal with people. And like, that was what scared you. If you went back to the jail, you would have been like, oh, all right. Mm-hmm. I might be a little rusty on these skills, but talking to the inmates, talking to the other COs, you would have been like riding a bike.
I'm much better now than what I used to be whenever I first got out, but I still have days where I struggle with it. And I have 30 drivers now almost. Oh, wow. So yeah, it's still a struggle to this day. It really is.
Yeah.
But how did writing the book during during COVID. And the book's title, this man was nice enough to reach out and come on the show with me. Folks, he wrote a book called A Higher Calling during his time with the COVID break. And he was nice enough to send me a copy of it. And I just want to say bravo, sir.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much for allowing me to read some of it. How did writing that book help you? Was it therapeutic for you?
It was around all the same time. So when I was mentoring a lot, like I had mentioned, these who were younger to me, right? These kids, and I was giving them the advice based off of what it was for me to come out of a combat environment during a time where it was unusual to have been in a combat environment. I mean, when I was in Somalia, the last combat before that was, the first Gulf War.
Yes.
And that was only a couple of months, with the actual combat only lasting like 70 hours or something like that.
Right.
Before that, it was all these small operations in, very specific units, Panama, Grenada. I mean, but, until you get back to Vietnam. So Jocko kind of talks about it all the time. It was, no one ever expected another large scale sustained combat operation. It was only going to be that maybe one time, if you were lucky to get into a combat operation. So to go from that, there were none of the support structures set up with the military coming out of a combat environment like that. So I had realized in 2020 that I had an undiagnosed PTSD condition. So this whole time, so the coping mechanisms that I developed over the course of those, ultimately decades, those were the things I was trying to mentor with. So as far as it being a cathartic thing or something that I needed to help myself with, I think I had already gone through that process a little bit. But it definitely did, the research and doing the other stuff. And you've read, I sent you the book. I was able to reach out to a bunch of different people with a bunch of different backgrounds who were gracious enough to write their own stories in their own words and allow me to include them in the book. So people from all different backgrounds, ethnicities, different branches of the military, different parts of the first responder field, but all of them it shows kind of this, everybody in these professions deals with the same things. So,
and everybody ends up dealing with it in different ways too.
Absolutely. And even somebody you could have a group of people who are involved in the exact same situation, and it will be different responses physiologically or psychologically. The response to that exact same situation can differ. So, yeah.
Let's say there's somebody listening right now that's went through several traumatic experiences, either in service or out of service for that matter. Trauma's trauma.
Trauma is trauma.
Without just totally giving your book away, what are some steps that some people may need to go through in order to receive some help?
One of the biggest things, I think, is understanding that, one, you're not alone in having to deal with the effects of the trauma. Now, you may have been the only one in that particular situation, but there are people out there who have been in a situation similar enough to understand, at least empathize with what has happened and what you're dealing with. And one of the biggest things that I've come to realize is talking about it helps so much.
It
So
does.
much. That old stigma of, be a man, suck it up, deal with it. That's good for building a fence. That's good for, fixing your car or whatever, or, fixing the kitchen sink. That is not good for the psychological damage done for having to deal with trauma in whatever form or fashion, whether you were the victim or, that's the thing with law enforcement, first responder, military. You might have had to been the one inflicting the trauma. So get some help. That absolutely get some help. And it doesn't matter if you were, super soldier, SEAL Ranger, sniper, whatever, or, a just a regular corpsman or a regular, quartermaster or just a uniform patrol or corrections officer, or, firefighters, man, firefighters. That is their entire job.
It is.
Is trauma. EMTs, paramedics, ER nurses, that is their entire job.
Mm-hmm.
So, go and seek help. But
So it don't matter how strong you think you are. There's always going to be one, two, sometimes more instances that are just going to stick into your brain, and you're not going to be able to shake them, no matter
nope.
what.
Yep.
And anytime I start talking about this, my voice gets lower and my voice gets deeper, and I register that because my mind automatically starts going back to those instances that I have never
Yep.
been able to shake.
Yep.
And I never will. But
no, and that's also a normal portion of it. I mean, I don't know if you've seen any of the videos of, like, there was one of a Korean War, a Marine who was in the Korean War. A guy was 89 years old or something. They were honoring him at an event, and he was crying. While they were reading his military, his awards and what they were for, he was crying. Another guy, World War II veteran, 101 years old, crying, talking. They don't ever go away, and that's normal. But in order to get to where you're 89 years old, 100 years old, and being okay talking about it, even though you're going to cry, you have to get the help now.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in hindsight, those 6 months where I basically stayed quiet, shouldn't have done that. And I know that now. But then that was the best way I knew how to deal with it.
Yeah. And you were processing it the only way you knew how.
Yeah.
Especially based off of everything you've always been told.
Yes.
Suck it up, be a man, no one cares. Right?
That's right. You put your head down and plow through. And whenever it gets to the point where it don't hurt anymore, that's whenever you think you're over it.
Or that's at least the advice is that's when you are over it.
Mm-hmm.
And if it comes up again, you've already dealt with it. You can deal with it again.
That's it. Yeah. I'm a firm believer that, God don't always want us to go through things, but he knows we're going to. And a lot of times he allows us to be able to use our experiences to help others. That way they can have a better grasp on how to do things. whether it would
Yep.
be, if nothing more than for us to be able to say, hey, don't do what I done.
Right. Yeah.
So, brother, I applaud you for everything that you've done, and I applaud you for doing your absolute best to help others in need with your book. And if you would tell everybody where they can find it when it comes out, that way, if there is somebody listening to this, they can be like, I really need to read this, or I know somebody who needs to read this, because everybody knows at least one person that has went through some stuff and needs some sort of direction to try and get through what they're going through.
Well, I truly appreciate those words that, um, but as far as where to find it, so the book it's called A Higher Calling, the Biblical Guide, primarily for first responders, military, and veterans. It's scheduled for release. It's in pre-publication right now, scheduled for release in late spring through Touchpoint Press. You can go to their website, www.touchpointpress, and they'll have a pre-publication link on their website where you can go in and see if it's on there. Otherwise, once it's published and it's released, it'll be at every major book outlet, in physical form, Amazon, all of that. It'll be on available e-reader as well.
Okay.
And again, so
Can they go on to and pre-order by any chance?
so there will be a pre-order link within Touchpoint Press. As of right now, when we're recording this, it's not set up for that yet. By the time it comes out, it should be on that. Because like I said, it's not scheduled for release until late spring of 2023.
Have you got a second book in mind?
I'm actually working on that right now. So, and then my wife told me this afternoon I need to write a third. So I guess that's
Yes.
going to be, I guess that's what's going to be my, what I land on as far as what I'm going to be doing in retirement. But the second one, it's going to follow in the same vein of, I really want to let people in the first responder field, military veterans, understand that, like what you were saying, God puts us through things. If you've been called into those fields, you have been called into a environment that specifically God placed you into those situations so that you can be a light to other people. And as hard as it is to deal with, and as hard as it is to process sometimes, you've been called. I mean, that pull in your heart, that desire to do that, that's just not you wanting to be a good person. That's, God wants you there, specifically wants you there in this time right now to do those things. So, don't be ashamed of what you have done. But the next book is going to be in that same vein of military, first responders, veterans, but it's going to be more specific. And so in this book, it's more not like a Bible study per se. It's more of what does the Bible say about these things that you had to do, the trauma, the violence, what does it say about, training? So you've seen that. But the next one is actually going to be, all right, so you're a Christian, you're a warrior. What does the Bible call you to? How does the Bible call you to live out your day-to-day life? Physical fitness, but, if you've been called to be a warrior, you need to be skilled in your warrior asset. You have to know how to shoot. You have to know how to fight. You have to be physically fit enough to win the fight. You
Yes.
have to, so, but not only that, your relationships. How are you called to behave in your relationships with your spouse, with your kids, with your non military, your non-first responder friends, your church, but also how are you called to behave with the people that you interact with, those inmates, those suspects, they're not bad people, they're evil. Evil exists in this world.
Yes.
And you going out there and facing that evil takes a toll. So yes. How are you going to be able to, or what are the steps that you need to do to be able to come back and still be able to do that day in, day out, year after year after year? So it's going to be, your spiritual warfare practices, your martial warfare practices, your, relational practices. And so that kind of stuff. So
I'm looking forward to seeing your book in print, your first one, and I'm looking forward to talking to you again whenever the second one comes out, my friend.
I'd be happy to. I appreciate that.
I appreciate you reaching out and telling me about what you had going on. I thank you for taking the time to come onto the porch and have a conversation with me. I hope this is the first of many.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been great. I had a great time.
It has. And I'm really hoping that you have all the success in the world. And any way this show can help you, you let me know.
I appreciate it. And thank you for your service as well.
Thank you. Where can people find you on social media to follow you and keep track of everything that's going on? So
I have not gotten a website yet. I know I need to, but
I'm guilty too. I don't have one.
I am what do they call it? I'm a Luddite or Luddite, whatever. I am not good technology wise. But I do have an Instagram, which is John Benjamin Jones, author. And my Facebook is just John Benjamin Jones. It's JOHN.
All right.
So
until next time, my friend, I appreciate you.
Thank you, sir.
Big thanks to John Jones for coming on the porch. You can find him on Instagram at Jonathan Benjamin Jones Author. Look for his book, A Higher Calling, to release in August. If you liked what he had to say, give him a like or follow. Tell him you heard about him on Porch Matters. If you are new to the show and like what you hear, hit that like, subscribe, or follow button and download the episodes in our archives. If this show has been a positive addition to your life, please rate the show and leave a review. It won't take you but a minute, and it really would help the show. Find us on social media by typing Porch Matters Podcast into the search bar. Word of mouth is still the best way of sharing. Pick your favorite episode and share it with at least one person this week. There are a lot of people out there that have never heard of a podcast before. I sure would appreciate it, and I'll see you next time right here on Porch Matters.